This is Bub-O Burst, a new indie game with a gaming first, a roguelike soundtrack. What is a roguelike soundtrack? The general definition of roguelike is a procedurally generated game that changes with each playthrough. The Bub-O Burst soundtrack is made up of more than 60 parts that get randomized and remixed every time you play. This results in over 2,000 musical combinations. It's the first of its kind that we know of.
Hi, I'm Gabe Swore. I'm the creator, designer, and programmer of Bub-O Burst.
And I'm Seth Sternberger, one half of the band 8-Bit Weapon. We make electronic music using vintage computers and 8-bit video game consoles.
Seth, how did you come up with the idea for Bub-O Burst soundtrack?
Having played Bub-O Burst, it was different than pretty much anything I've ever played in a good way. And I was thinking, how can we keep the game entertaining for as long as possible? Because there's going to be a certain point. The game's easy to get into when you first start playing, but eventually you get to a point where you're going to have to learn and play harder, right? Learn more about the levels and figure things out. It's not going to be as easy. Typically in traditional games, there's a soundtrack that just keeps playing it over and over again, and sometimes that's an obstacle. So I'm thinking, how can I remove that obstacle so every time you play, it feels fresh? So why don't we have a roguelike randomized soundtrack where the songs, the arrangement of the songs, they're all songs, it's not just random noise. All the songs are randomly arranged every time you launch the game. So every time you play the game, you shut it down and you open it up again from Steam, it's a different soundtrack with the same elements. Maybe you hear the same bass line in level 1, or the same lead in level 1, but a different bass line, or the drums are different, but the other two the same. There's different elements. It's either totally new or familiar with different elements. So every time you play, there's something fresh about it.
Actually, I changed it so that now every time you play it randomizes it.
Oh, okay. So not
you don't
just
need
at
to
launch.
Yeah, it's not just at launch. So like when you go to play it, it plans out all the whole soundtrack. And then let's say you die and then start the first one again, that's when it will re-randomize that. But if you play through first, second, third, it'll play all that stuff without re-randomizing it. So if you're having a good run, it just plays and it makes sure that it doesn't repeat certain things. But then when you go to start over, that's when it would re-randomize.
And then it also has to change tempo at one point seamlessly, which was also another challenge.
Yeah, so then at the end of the game, towards the end of the game, there's an extra sector, and the sector you play all 40 levels in a row. So the music doesn't ever stop. Like basically when you're playing before, it's like at the end of each sector of levels, there's a pause and then it can re-randomize or grab the next section and put it in. But when it's going through all this stuff, it has to change as you go, and that was kind of almost like I stumbled upon it because I thought, well, I'll just start the song over when we get to the new sector, but like it worked seamlessly. And then the hard part is to get the tempo to change. But yeah, once I figured that out, it sounds awesome because it's like basically remixing the entire soundtrack as you're playing to the rate at which you're playing through the game, so
you basically built like a mini AI arranger DJ into the game.
Yeah. So Seth, when we first started making this game, you came up with the idea to do this. And then we started asking around, and we asked a lot of people if there was ever a game that did this type of thing before. And we came up with 3 games that came close. One game is BallBlazer, right? Came out for the Atari 8-bit systems and Commodore 64 and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, even I think it made it up to the Amiga and maybe the Atari ST.
What makes BallBlazer different than what we did, Seth?
What BallBlazer did was make an infinite song, one song that could play forever. It randomizes the lead melody and to a lesser effect the noise channel drums and the bass line. But the thing that you really hear most, because there's very little variation that I've heard in different versions of BallBlazer on different systems, the drums and the bass are pretty constant. It's the melody that goes from fast to slow through infinity. It's got an algorithm program that it's going to always do something different forever, but it's one track.
And personally, I'm not a fan of that track because it is that bass line that gets repeated so much that you're just like, it's very repetitive, even though you have this like all this other stuff going on.
The lead breaks it up a lot, but that bass line is great for the first 5 minutes. You can, because it's just do 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 do, and then it repeats forever.
And the other one is Irhythm II for the Game Boy Advance that came out in 2003. So Irhythm II is basically just the title screen. And on the title screen at the bottom, you can see you can select between different lead, bass, melody, harmony. I don't know. But there's 4 parts that you can change on the fly. And there's only 5 choices, I think, for each. And then that's just for the title screen. There's nothing in game that does that. Yeah. And it doesn't even affect the game at all. You just do it for the title screen.
Well, that's interesting. So you can like rearrange / remix in the title screen.
Yeah, it's a cool idea.
Yeah, I like it, but that in itself is not random. If you think about it, that's you making choices.
And then what about Prince of Persia for DOS? Because it's the DOS version, right?
And I don't know if it does it to any extent on the other versions. I was listening to the DOS version today, and it's there. I think for the cutscenes, it's preset, and the intro it's set. In some levels, it's standard pre-recorded music. But for like the caves and the desert, and I think the temple and other things, it's more of an ambient, randomized like sounds. There's still melodies and bass sounds, but it's really sparse and spaced out. So it's still a randomized arrangement, but it's not an entirely randomized arrangement soundtrack like Bub-O Burst.
Seth, how was like writing music for Bub-O Burst different than writing like normal composition?
I had to think very compact musically about how do I get this soundtrack to play completely random. Every time you play these levels, the bass and the melody work together, and there's no dissonance, because the drums will work with anything. That's the easy part. That was the dessert of the project, was doing all the drum beats. That was a lot of fun. The challenge was figuring out the chord progressions for the different zones that would give me the most space to do a lead melody and a bass line that were all the versions I did were totally different from each other, but still worked together. And so I think I achieved that, and we'll find out in the comments if we did not.
Well, I like playing it, and I think it's like I worked on this game for since March, and when I started getting the music in there, that's when I was like, oh man, this is like so much fun. And now I feel like I got to make it harder for myself, because I'm so used to playing it that I want to have like more of a challenge, and then and have the banging soundtrack, the block rocket beats that are in there,
The Bub-O Burst demo is currently available on Steam for PC and Mac. Links in the description. Thanks for watching.
And you just thought you were going to get a song, and you just hit play on the OGG or MP3 or whatever, and you're done.
Yeah, next time maybe I'll do that, because it's a lot easier than what we did. Will there be a sequel to Bub-O Burst? Well, one thing I'd like to do, since this is the 3rd Bub-O game, is somehow do some kind of collection of everything, and put everything together into one thing. That's hard because each game is for different systems. So that's going to be the challenge. And then maybe when I get to that point, if it is that popular, maybe I'll do like a game that just goes with that collection. So it could be a cool, like, big game, and then have all the little games in there, I don't know. We'll see. It all depends if more than one person plays this game or not.
Well, 2 people have so far. You're already up 1.